Yeah, let's get started.
All right. So I thought I'd start with a big picture question, but I'm going to give some qualifications on the question before I even ask it. So I was messaging with Ray outside of the group, and Ray may or may not be here today. It's his birthday, and he has big plans for his birthday. So, but the content of our messages made him want to be here despite his big plans. So we'll see. But in any case, the question that was after we left the last session, I said, okay, I think I have a handle on this now. And the thing that I have felt that I have a handle on, but then quickly it all fell apart from under me, was that question of whether Flaubert within this novel is pronouncing judgment, whether he believes in ethics, whether he has, whether there's any sense of right or wrong in this book. And so we had the shorthand of things like he's describing, not prescribing, which I definitely think is true, but I'm trying to orient that in my own brain philosophically and separate it from things that are not true. So bear with me because I'm admittedly unclear on even the question that I'm asking, but it feels to me very important to ask it. So in one sense, there is incessant, explicit judgment throughout this book. He judges so many of these characters as petty, stupid, ridiculous, absurd, trivial. There's a sense of judgment throughout, and that's the kind of tongue-in-cheek aspect that I was pointing to, and the kind of mockery of Homais and the scene at the agricultural fair. There's so much mockery of the world as he sees it. And then, I think what I was, the place that the question of judgment came up is that I was trying to figure out what's good in his world. What is the good that we ought to be striving for? Because he tells us plenty about what's bad, but we don't have a foil for the bad to provide us with something to admire and respect. The closest to that is Emma. But what's admirable about her seems to be that she's conscious of what there is to resent about the world. That's what's admirable, is that she gets it. She gets how disappointing and trivial and petty the world is, and he kind of seems to sympathize with and feel pity for those characters, but that seems like the best that you can do. So let me try to briefly state my own view of it, and then I want people to say you disagree, you agree. And the other qualification I want to give is the novel's not over, so we can't come to any ultimate conclusions about this until it is, but still we have a pretty good sense of what his outlook on the world is so far. So here's my best summary of my own view in the novel so far. Life is tedious. Most people are tedious. And we have lots of characters to exemplify and make us feel how profoundly tedious it is. Charles in his way, Homais in his way, and so many others. Art deludes us into thinking that there's something more, that values are possible, that passion and romance and, the satisfaction of grand idealistic desires, that's possible. Art deludes us into thinking that. In reality, we chase after that, but we never find it. It always ends up being elusive. So, Rodolphe offers some appeal, but when it comes down to it, he's just a phony who's manipulating and taking advantage of her. Or she'll try to persuade herself that Charles has something to satisfy her if only she pays close attention to it, but then she ends up resenting that too. So I guess I think that I might be equivocating on what judgment is, because he's judging things almost metaphysically, like that the world is tedious, and then because of that, it's almost like anything goes. So that's where the non-judgment comes in, because there's no possibility of really achieving fulfillment, or seemingly there's no possibility of that, then all we can do is, like, we use the word kind of thrash and flail and grasp onto things and do our best to find value. But he doesn't judge those efforts, because it's all futile anyway. So that was probably pretty incoherent, but does it give anyone thoughts or comments? Yes, Grace, please.
Well, I think especially the last part that you said about everything is so tedious, so kind of anything goes. I think that's the message that I'm getting, at least. And I think that it's supported by this incredibly ouch line from the reading. The human language is like a cracked kettle on which we beat out a time for a dancing bear when we hope with our music to move the stars. So it's like you have this idea that with your music of your living, that you're going to move the stars, that the world's going to care about you. But really you're just tapping a cracked kettle while a bear dances. And that is so sad. But I think that supports what you're saying. And so in as much as I can hazard a guess at the answer to your question based on what I've read so far, I think I agree for that. I think that not only with that quote, with other things that have happened, and so many things that have fallen short of ideals, I think that makes a lot of sense.
Okay.
I didn't hear you. I thought maybe you said somebody else. Yeah, I think you're totally right, Lisa. I think if you think outside of the context, because I think this is kind of typical of more modern thought. Maybe when religion kind of exits the scene, you get a little bit more this nihilistic view of living. And I think if you think outside the context of what's possible in life, because that's a pretty Randian view. I think it's a pretty uncommon view prior to her, that, yeah, you can still achieve things in life, but it seems like in this book, it's like ultimately you're going to die, you're going to age, you're going to go through too much time that you become dead, old, or bored, and that seems to be what he's getting across. Eventually, nothing is going to be ultimately fulfilled,
Yeah, so the category of art I'd want to differentiate it from is something like, let's say, Cyrano de Bergerac and Rostand, where you can be an idealist, you're not going to fulfill your ideals, you're not going to have material reward for your ideals, but you can still be an idealist. There's still something to gain substantially. There's still a standard of what it means to be good, and that seems very absent from this novel. So whereas there's a lot of novels where goodness is at odds with practicality, so you strive for the good, but it means you're going to have to sacrifice and suffer in the real world. There's still that sense of nobility and grandeur and the capacity for goodness. Here there doesn't seem to be. I don't see an example of that. There's just, it's like, I don't know, the emphasis really does feel to me like it's on what art does to delude us, that how art tricks us into thinking that there's more to life than there is. Yeah. So you go to the theater and you fall in love with the actor on the stage because there's this, you can project everything you've read in books about what's possible, but then the reality is Rodolphe, who's scheming how to abandon you.
Yeah. If you read that scene in the theater in a Randian context, like if Rand wrote that scene, it would almost be like in We the Living, when she's kissing the statues in the beginning, and then she meets Leo, and the statue becomes real. And that's in a much different context.
Very different. It's a delusion. It's not an essence of something real. It's a delusion about something that's absolutely unreal and unachievable.
it's like that delusion's becoming real, though. You know what I mean? Like, that's the delusion in art, and here's the delusion in reality.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Any other thoughts or comments about this? I mean, it can just be something kind of in the backdrop as we go along. Yes, John.
Oh, I was not muted. Oh,
Oh,
I think it's very important to remember that all of what you're talking about in the theater
mhm,
is happening inside Emma.
mhm,
So to extend that to Flaubert is unfair.
mm,
It's what's happening to Emma. So she's the one with illusions.
mhm.
She's the one who has emptiness.
Mhm.
It
Well,
doesn't.
I do agree, and I think it's again important, of course, to keep to not conflate the author's view and Emma's, although she is the character, does definitely seem to be the character that the author most sympathizes with, and she's the kind of focal point of it. But it is important to keep those separate. But I think the problem is that there's no, with the possible exception of Justin, which I think it was Ray who mentioned Justin last time, there's nobody who is an exception to, there's no example of somebody achieving something otherwise. So it just, I tried to condense my thought as well as I could. And my feeling was that he presents life as petty and tedious, romantic art as something that tells us that ideals are possible. And then in the world, we have stupid people who are unaware of their own empty existence. We've got, the list of characters who aren't clever enough or don't have enough depth of soul to realize how empty their existence is. Or we have those who long idly for more, but are unable to achieve it. That's what it seems like we've been presented with so far.
Yeah.
Wendy?
It occurred to me when you were saying it about art that I think it also brings in religion, so I don't know if it should be broader than just art, but any kind of ideal, because the spiritual ideal, and I mean, it was earlier in the book, but then with her illness, it brings it back in again for her, and there's the discussion. So I don't know, maybe it's a little broader.
I love this scene where she just basically substitutes religion for her novels and tries to, no, that is definitely true. It's ideals, any kind of presentation of higher ideals is false and empty.
Yeah, that's a really good connection.
All right, well, we can go back to the concretes of this section and just kind of leave that in the background. And of course, the first incident we have to discuss is the clubfoot. Grace, would you like to share what you
I sent to you yesterday?
what you sent me yesterday?
Oh boy. So I like to keep my reading fresh in my head before the book club. So I always try to wait till later in the week. And this week was more busy than usual. So I had to do all my reading yesterday. And so I started doing the reading in the morning, and I was reading that first chapter, and I texted Lisa in the midst of it and said, why, oh, why did I leave my reading until the day before the book club? Because now there's no way for me to procrastinate finding out what happens when Charles screws up this surgery.
There was no doubt from the start. So it's an amazing scene. It's horrific, but it's amazing. So what do we get from it? Well, the tediousness and pettiness of everybody involved, because what are the motivations for treating this clubfoot? Not the well-being of the patient. That doesn't seem to figure anywhere into calculations,
No.
except as a veneer.
Bribe.
Yeah. Oh gosh, Homais bribes to him that it's going to make him a ladies' man and he's going to be able to serve his country. And
That made me so sad.
so the well-being of the patient is something superficially used to talk him into it, but the real motivation is to put their village on the map,
Mhm.
to give Homais a subject for one of his romanticized articles. For Emma, it's to have something more substantial than love to lean on with Charles.
Yeah.
She wants a reason to love him, and maybe if he makes a name for himself in medicine, then she'll have something that she can be motivated by.
Yeah. Can I share the line after he screws it up? When she's thinking to herself, she was not sharing his humiliation, but enduring a private one, that of having imagined that such a man could be worth something.
Oof.
I said, ouch, out loud when I read that, as if she had not already clearly perceived his mediocrity 20 times over.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. So I think part of the pain of the anticipation that was very deliberate on the author's part was to stress to us that the clubfoot was stronger than his healthy. I mean, he had completely adapted to life and was completely competent to, there's in medicine, the do no harm principle. And that does not seem to be in anybody's mind here, because this is not something he needed. It was empty promises of motivated by desires for grandeur. But it's the details. I don't know. When we step back from that situation, we see again people's petty motivations. We see Emma's desperate flailing for something that she can admire in her husband. We see doom and destruction coming, but he's so effective at making that extraordinarily painful to witness. So just things, little details like for the moment when they think that the surgery is going to have been a success. I love this description of Charles, and it says, Charles ate with gusto and even asked for a cup of coffee with dessert, an extravagance he permitted himself only on Sundays when they had company. So for Emma, desperate for her romantic vision of a hero and somebody with some passion and spirit and life in him, this is as much life as Charles has, that he will allow himself a cup of coffee as an exception with dessert. And then what effect does this have on her? They spoke about their future fortune. She felt happy to revive herself with a healthier emotion. And what is the manifestation of her momentary renewed spirit of love for her husband? She even noticed with surprise that his teeth were not at all bad. That's it. So, and then that scene that you were describing. Okay, and so then when, all right, so that scene you were describing, where we have Emma and Charles sitting together with the reality of what has actually become of Hippolyte, is that how we would say his name? She is thinking, he is thinking, if Hippolyte were to die later on, he would be the assassin. That seemed at least a little bit noble, that he's taking responsibility. But the thoughts that follow, what answer would he give in his visits later when people asked him questions? He sought to find a mistake he made, but he couldn't. He's not even capable of finding what his error was after the fact. They would laugh about him, gossip about him. Some of his colleagues might attack him. Hippolyte might even sue him. Charles seems like a man who is buffeted by forces around him with with so little of an anchor of independent thoughts.
Oh, sure. Yeah. He's been like that since we met him. Like it didn't take much
Absolutely.
for him to stop trying to succeed in school. And then he was just like, whatever, I'll just memorize the answers to the questions. It'll be fine. And then
Yeah.
his mother and father have always decided everything for him.
Mm-hmm.
And now his wife does usually. So
Yes. There's a line much later that captures it well that says, let's see. Homais says, I'm surprised that in our time, in an enlightened century, we still persist in forbidding an intellectual relaxation that is inoffensive, edifying, and even sometimes therapeutic. Isn't it, doctor? I suppose so. The doctor answered casually, either because sharing the same ideas, he didn't want to offend anyone else, or because he didn't have any ideas. So
I
those
wonder
are
which
the
one it was.
possibilities. Either speak so as not to offend, or speak empty words because you don't really have any thoughts. Joseph.
I remember at the beginning of the book, there was a question on why were we spending so much time on Charles's backstory? And I actually have found it really valuable because it's helped us understand how he became who he became. Like I really feel like I understand his character. And it's such a good contrast to Emma as well. Like everything about how he became who he was is not what she wants. And is also like, he can't even, like his ideal was finding her. Because it was, if you remember like how he discovered, well, he could make a choice all of a sudden when he first, when his first wife died, all of a sudden he discovered he enjoyed this bachelor life because he could, I think he said like he could eat when he wanted to and come and go as he pleased. And that was this amazing miracle for him. And you contrast that with what Emma imagines as like the ideal from all her books. So I found that really helpful.
Yeah, to go along with that, I loved the line where he's projecting what he desires for his daughter when she grows up. I don't know if I'm going to be able to find it quickly, but it was like somebody with a good job, or I mean, it was just something so mundane and so just so bland,
just so regular. Yeah, like
so
he just wanted
so regular. That's
he
all.
wanted for her what he has for himself.
Yeah, those are his greatest dreams for her.
Well, I mean, when she was born, he was described as like, you know, being so satisfied because now he has everything.
Yeah. Right, exactly. So Joseph, I just want to clarify that my question was a little bit different from that, but I'm not sure what value there is in the question exactly. But what struck me as odd was not that we get a lot of his backstory, but that this is called Madame Bovary. It seems to be the story of Emma, and yet we started completely in the world of Charles and then shifted. And then we're sort of looking at the world, or we're kind of walking through the world with Emma after that. And that struck me as unusual as a structure for a novel, that you start kind of walking along with one character, experiencing the world with them, and then shift to somebody else. So I don't know if there is a purpose to that. I don't know if that strikes anyone else as unusual, but even just picking the book up and knowing it's called Madame Bovary and knowing I'm like, who is this guy? Where are we? Because I would have expected to start with her. So that
right. I guess once I got to her, it felt right to me because it gave me a good contrast of their different capacities for romanticism and like their different views. So I found it helped me understand her a little more because of like the time we spent on him. But yeah, before you get to her, it's weird. It's why I kept wanting to be like, where's Madame Bovary?
Yeah.
This is,
I thought
kept
it was going to be about his mom.
You thought it was going to be about his mom. Yeah. Yeah.
Kathleen.
Hi, good morning, everyone. So I have just a few quick clubfoot comments. I definitely got the tongue-in-cheek aspect of this from Flaubert when Homais comes to their bedroom, you know, after Charles had done what he had done, to read the article that he had written, you know, praising Charles. And literally in the next paragraph, it's, oh my gosh, he's dying.
He's dying. Yeah.
Also too, I really thought about clubfoot. I'm one of those people that I'm really squeamish with medical things. I can't even watch my own blood being drawn.
Mm.
And I wondered if Flaubert maybe has medical training, because some of the descriptions of the tendons and the anatomy were really detailed. So I actually have a medical dictionary. I'm going to look them up and see. It was just interesting to me. There was just a lot of description of the foot or anatomical things.
Yeah, it was very clinical and
and when they talked about the tendon popping, I'm like, ooh, it was really, I cringed, and gangrene. And so anyway, it was, I enjoyed reading that. But I did wonder if maybe he had medical training, and then I really started to kind of think more than a lot about clubfoot, like how would you treat it? And why would they cut a tendon? Why would they put a box around it? So anyway, I had clubfoot
I'll
on.
interject.
Clubfoot on.
Amish in the chat says some of it doesn't make sense clinically. If he really had gangrene, he would be dead. And Amish is a doctor. So our resident doctor has weighed in on it.
Has said he maybe doesn't have training. It's certainly the details, as we have said, Flaubert is very good at putting us very much in the reality of the moment. And those details really made us feel maybe it almost made us feel the incompetence of it too, because he's sort of speaking about it as if in a sort of authoritative tone about what's going on while we're watching Charles botch the procedure completely. But yes, I found that horrific and disgusting too.
it was like one of those horror movies that is just like, there's just so much blood, and it's the camera doesn't cut away from it, and you have to watch it.
Well, to have the contrast between him getting around on his very competent, almost healthy clubfoot, and then the contraption and gangrene and miscut tendons, and
I texted you when I got to the description of how his clubfoot was fine, like it was effective for him.
Yeah.
That was when I was like, this is bad. This is going to be so bad.
Yeah. Shoshana.
Yeah, well, this is not a medical point, but I guess, and I haven't researched this, but I remember when I read it, I thought that part of what was going on here was a joke or a commentary or a contrast with the most famous clubfoot we know, which is Byron. Okay, now Byron was said to have a clubfoot, and I think we now think he had infantile paralysis or something, but basically, in literature, when you mention clubfoot, yeah, that's Byron. And so but in this novel, it's not Byron. It's, this is a medical problem, something for Charles to make a mistake with. It's almost as if somebody comes in with a very large nose, and Dr. Bovary thinks, oh, let's get this guy some plastic surgery, which you wouldn't, there's a famous large nose. Okay. Yeah. So, and I think, Flaubert certainly was a reader of Byron, and everybody and so basically, I guess whenever I hear clubfoot, especially back in the 19th century, I'm thinking Byron. And, but here it's not an association with the romantic poet. It's something for Homais to say, okay, do this thing, and then for Charles to do this thing, and then for it to work out so disastrously wrong. That's it.
Thank you. Yeah. So for a reader, it might conjure kind of romantic visions of a great poet, and then what's happening is this blunt reality, blunt, painful reality.
Yeah.
Yeah. John.
I mentioned a number of sessions back that the two essays, the one that begins the book and the one that ends, are very, very good. In regard to getting a quick overview of Flaubert, you could read Wikipedia, but Frederick Brown, who has the afterword, it's only 11 pages. He's the biographer, the latest biographer of Flaubert. Flaubert's father was a very famous surgeon.
Mhm.
Flaubert grew up in the house where autopsies and surgeries were
That's
done
right.
all the time.
That's right.
He was very conversant with, my mother was an RN.
Mhm.
I'm very familiar with medical texts because of that.
Okay.
Flaubert was too.
That would make sense of why he's familiar, but not an expert, not trained himself, but exposed. But actually, I did know that. I forgot until you just mentioned it, because there's a character who will appear later that I read was based on Flaubert's father. So I'll just drop that little teaser in there. I don't know. I can't. This was according to one reference that I read, but I'll just drop that teaser in there and we'll talk about it when we get to that character. So the other thing I wanted to emphasize here is that passage that I think you were drawing from, and connect that to what Joseph said about the completely different worldviews of Charles and Emma. So after the fact, when they're sitting there thinking, so he is thinking about what's going to happen to his reputation, what will people think, what will he be attacked, will he be sued, and Emma is thinking, as they hear the screams of Hippolyte from the distance as he's having his leg amputated, she frowned with a nervous twitch, then went on, yet it was for him, for this creature, for this man who understood, who felt nothing. There he was, quite calm, not even suspecting that the ridicule henceforth attaching itself to his name would now smear her as well. She had tried to love him and had even repented in tears her affair with another man. And then he says, I don't, Valgus, maybe it was a Valgus. So he's just thinking about the medical facts themselves and what's going to happen to his reputation. She's thinking about the romantic implications of this, that she can now no longer love him. And he's not even thinking about that. He's not thinking about what it's going to do to her. And then I just love this line. She looked up to see what he meant, because that kind of jolts her back into the world from his perspective. She looked up to see what he meant, and they stared at each other in silence, almost astonished to see each other. So far apart were they in their respective meditations.
Yep.
There could not be two universes farther apart than Charles's and Emma's. They don't, there's no overlap in the Venn diagram of Charles and Emma. And then it goes on to say everything about him irritated her now, his face, his clothes, the things he didn't say, his entire person, his very existence. I could read that whole passage, but all right. Stefan, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I just wanted to comment on the patient sitting there and they're arguing about like who has a stronger stomach, and I just I've been in that situation before. It's kind of not like that, but I remember when I was like 16, I was dating this girl, and I was working at the time, and my friend called me and told me these two guys were fighting over like my girlfriend, like wanting her, and I was like, but she's my girlfriend. And it's like these two guys are arguing over like, and you're just sitting there like, well,
as if
like,
you're irrelevant to this.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
Right.
So that's what that reminded me of. But I just want to say it's comedic and how terrible it is, but it's funny in a way, but it's not funny.
Yeah.
And that seems to be this whole scene.
That's how I feel about a lot of things in this book.
Absolutely.
It's funny, but it's awful, but it's funny, but it's really terrible.
Yes. Yes. Okay, so Emma runs back into the arms of Rodolphe, having failed to, what was the end of that last section? It was like, it would be better if she loved her husband. So she tries, and that's the end of that. And they embraced, and all their bitterness melted away like snow in the warmth of their kiss. Her love for Rodolphe increased each day in proportion to the revulsion she felt for her husband. So how's that for a foundation of love? The more I hate my husband, the more I love
The
you.
more I love my, what do you call this man? I don't know. This
Yeah.
guy. I hate him so much.
All right. So let's talk about Rodolphe.
Do we have?
Yeah, we do. We really do.
I'm
We
just
really
kidding.
do.
His do I understand this correctly, that he's just like flip-flopping back and forth through this entire section? I think he ultimately knows that he doesn't want to run away with her, but like he keeps like falling back in love with her, and like depending on the way that her eyes look, he is like back to being completely invested in their relationship. And so he goes back and forth so many times. I figured they probably wouldn't run away together, but like up until the last minute, I was like, oh, is he? No,
Yeah, actually going.
No.
Yeah, I guess I'm not sure. I think I read it. I think the way I read it, I wouldn't describe him as completely invested in it, and I didn't much feel that there was any chance he was going to run away with her. But it was just a question of when he was going to end it.
Okay,
Like,
that's a much better way to put what I was.
Time to end it yet? No, not yet. I'm still having fun. Oh,
yeah.
Ray
I'm
is
still kind of enjoying it, and maybe I'll stick around for a couple more days. But there's a kid. I'm not into the kid. And well, happy birthday, Ray.
Thank you.
Yes, I did mention that it was your birthday.
Yeah, I'm glad to make it to this. Yeah, so on is sort of flip-flopping. It's more he's just not thinking. I think that's the actual thing, is that he's not actually, as in he knows on some of like, I'm never gonna do that. I'm never gonna leave with her. It's not worth it. It's too much of a hassle. He knows that in his gut, but he's just like, I'll just keep going.
Yeah.
You know, yeah.
Whenever she does something pretty, he sticks around, that like extends the finish line for him a little bit more. Like when she has those tears in her eyes, and they're described very beautifully. He's like, oh, what a woman. And he sticks around for like another month or something like that.
But he also doesn't really have to dump her until it comes down to something. And what it comes down to is the actual departure date. Okay, so when there's an actual departure date and he's meant to meet her, okay, now this is the time that I have to end it. But till then, you can just kind of go along, and there's nothing to precipitate a line drawn.
Yeah, and to me, like the evasion, as I think Stefan said in a comment, the clearest thing is just the fact of the child issue. He never actually, he knows that's an issue. Like, if you want to make this a realization, like, you have to actually talk about that. But he's like, well, let's just hope her little, I don't want to bring up that complication into it. So I have to say, it is the perfect, Rudolph's reaction is to me the perfect encapsulation of, I know I'm not going to do this, but I'm going to act like I'm going to do it until I finally admit to myself I'm not.
But there is, before it comes to the point that he actually decides to write her the letter, it says, she says, "You're my king, my idol. You're so good, so handsome, so intelligent, so strong." And it says, he had heard these things so many times that they no longer held any interest for him. Emma resembled all his old mistresses, and the charm of novelty, that's what Emma had going for her. Yes, she's beautiful, but so were all the other mistresses. What Emma has going for her is novelty, and that wears off, falling away little by little like articles of clothing, revealed in all its nakedness the eternal monotony of passion. How's that for a line? The eternal monotony of passion, which always assumes the same forms and speaks the same language. So the language of passion is just empty, phony, hot air. It that masks something, this longing that's never really going to be fulfilled, and it's all going to just fade away eventually.
What beautiful cynicism.
Beautiful. And then in terms of insight into this character, or kind of expanding our understanding of him, I found this powerful and disgusting. So she has fallen head over heels, like, I mean, in proportion to her resentment to her husband, she has now thrown herself into this relationship. And that's what kind of makes him start backing away. And then it says, he discarded the last shreds of modesty and treated her without consideration, making her into something compliant and corrupt. It was an idiotic, one-sided attachment filled with admiration for him and sensual satisfaction for herself. She was in a blissful state of numbness. Her soul sank deeper into this inebriation and was drowned in it. But so she's like drowning in drunkenness of passion, and he consequently realizes he can just exploit her and treat her contemptuously without consideration, because she's hooked, I guess. There's nothing more he has to do. He doesn't have to seduce any longer. He's just got her and can do whatever he wants. Stefan?
I find it really interesting when I'm trying to judge these characters, and when you're both wrong, you can just find like rationalizations of why each are right. I mean, like he pretty much said in the letter, like, I'm doing you a favor, and he really was, but at the same time, he's really not. You know what I mean? It's just so, you just get to a point where it's just all corrupt and so bad. But I actually was writing in my notes here before Ray appeared, and so I wish Ray was here because of the comment he made last week, and then he showed up. So I summoned you. But happy birthday, by the way, man. But yeah, and he was talking about last week, and it was really funny about when you meet somebody and you're already thinking of how can I get rid. And and I've had that thought myself, and my policy has been just be honest of what you want out of the relationship, and hopefully it's reciprocated. But this is the ultimate end of it. But anyways, I don't know. I just wanted to make that comment. But I just thought the fake tear was interesting on the letter. I thought that was once again funny and terrible.
Well, I want to talk about that whole scene because oh my gosh, but there's so many in this section. So first of all, in terms of what you were just describing about the rationalizations on both sides, and that, it's how he's treating her is horrible and she is clearly deluded. But at the same time, it says, never had Madame Bovary been so beautiful as now. She had that indefinable beauty that comes from joy, enthusiasm, and success, a beauty that is but the blending of temperament with circumstances. Her desires, her regrets, her experience of sensual pleasure, and her continually youthful illusions had nurtured her gradually as fertilizer, rain, wind, and sunshine nurture a flower, and she finally blossomed forth in all the fullness of her being. And it goes on from there. And that sounds to me completely earnest, very beautiful. So this is the best that you can hope for, is flowering into beauty from the pursuit of passion, even though she's going to get dumped in a couple of pages and it's all going to be over. But at least she's alive in that moment. She's alive. That seems to be the most alive we've seen her so far. Ray, did you still have a comment?
Yeah, a couple of things. One is that I just find Flaubert to be just wonderful at these contrasts of, you were worshiping the speech at the fairground along with the seduction. And here we have another two beautiful comparisons of of Charles laying in bed thinking about the domestic happiness, and then her going off to foreign cities, driven by 4 white stallions or whatever they are. And then you have the contrast of all of these cliche beautiful words that Rodolphe is writing down, and the bitter cynicism of his actual feelings. And he really is phoning it in. He's really putting the minimum of effort. Just like, fine, all right, whatever, women or whatever. I love that.
I have my own example of those contrasts. I actually wrote it down as contrasts in my notes. So one, now I have the line, was this description of her and her indefinable beauty that comes from blossoming forth in the fullness of her being. And then it's towards the end of that section that it says, Charles pictured to himself his daughter's future. She would embroider slippers for her husband, busy herself with household chores, fill the whole house with her engaging ways and her gaiety. No, this is with him. Eventually, they would think about getting her settled. They would find her some fine young man with a solid business who would make her happy. So that's Charles's vision of romantic fulfillment after we just saw Emma's. And then this pithy contrast. While he dozed off at her side, she awoke to other dreams. So he's just falling asleep, thinking about their domestic bliss, and she's staying up thinking about other things. So I wanted to mention that when I tried to lure Grace into reading this book with me, the line I chose out of context just sent her one line to say, this is a novel you must read. The line of all things was about Rodolphe, because this is one of my favorite lines in the whole book. There is that, I mean, the scene of him taking out the box of relics from his old mistresses and kind of going through the locks of hair, and there's all different colors and none of them mean anything. I mean, a lock of hair is something we associate with true sentimentality and passionate love. For him, it's just, I mean, I guess notches on your belt, locks of hair in a box. So yeah. So and finding a varied assortment of bouquets, a garter, a black mask, pins, locks of hair, so many locks, brunette ones, blonde ones. Some were even stuck to the hinges of the box and broke off when it was opened. Oh my gosh, taking a romantic metaphor and just breaking it apart on hinges. But anyway, this was the line that I sent to Grace. He puts the box aside saying, what a collection of nonsense. That's what it is to him, a collection of nonsense. This summed up his opinion because pleasures, like children in a schoolyard, had so trampled on his heart that nothing green could grow there. What did pass through was more thoughtless than school children. It did not even leave, like them, a name scribbled on the wall.
It's such a good
That is absolutely brilliant. So pleasures just trampled on his heart, but it's not even the thoughtlessness of school children because there's no graffiti left on the wall of his heart. That is just the perfect way to capture him. Ray.
And I just want to make a distinction about Rodolphe. Is you say like, oh, like all these bits of hair and letters and all of that are like the notches on a, and it's like, that's not Rodolphe's kind of person. He's not one of these guys who's just, he's a genuine sensualist.
Yeah.
Of he actually does enjoy being with, and even, on a certain superficial emotional level, at least, like he does delight in Emma. So there's a difference between his kind of creep and a much worse kind of creep, which is more popular today.
No.
So I just want to make that distinction.
He's not counting his conquest. That's not the idea of the box is not taking pride and satisfaction in being able to count the conquest, which is what we usually associate with notches on a belt. So it's not that, you're right. That's not the aspect that I want to emphasize. It's the emptiness of meaning to him of these past relationships, that there's not, these relics mean nothing to him.
Yeah, it's maybe the comparison is like the wrappers of pieces of candy.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, it doesn't mean anything, it's, and the thing is that for him, and for him, it's, I mean, the thing is, just to give him I'm sorry to be the Rudolph defender, but I will say is that his past relationships, besides Emma, seem to have been about worth that much. As in, like letters asking for money, as in we know the kinds of girls he's dealing with. And just so many of them, like even the ones that are love, it's like, well, there's an affected kind of thing that's even lower than Emma. Like Emma's special.
But you're presuming that there is a better kind, and there isn't really. So I think the defense of Rodolphe is that, he's alive. He is living sensual pleasures. They don't delude yourself like the books do into thinking there's going to be some great romance that he's going to devote his life to and, have the achievement of this ideal relationship. Don't be silly and think that. And he is, he could be more honest and straightforward with her. So he's kind of dragging her into the delusion and not setting her straight. But the defense of him seems more like, well, what else are you going to do?
Yeah, as in Flaubert's universe, all you have, I think it was Stefan saying it's like, oh, they're in two different worlds, or maybe you were saying that. And it's like, well, one thing about it is that they're both in Flaubert's world, though. As in, you have either sort of tedious, maybe at best warm domestic life, and then you have these fabulous dreams, which are just mist, that will last about as long. And that's sort of, well, Rudolph, it's like, he's in a sense, you can't blame him. And his sense justification as a character is, well, it's very naturalistic. Of he didn't choose to be that way. It's like, oh yeah, this is just what pleasure does to a person in that world, in Flaubert's world. It just makes you into this kind of conniving, superficial kind of person.
Well, you unfortunately missed my discussion of judgment at the opening of the conversation. We can discuss it separately later, or the recording is there too. But the way I was trying to summarize it for myself is that he does. It's understanding what we mean by judgment, and I feel like when I'm talking about the novel, I have to be careful not to equivocate on that. And philosophically, I don't feel like I have a really clear statement of what I see as Flaubert's perspective, but just basically, like, he judges the world as tedious. He's not, you could imagine a naturalist, and I'm sure you could name some, who are just sort of reporting on the world and doing it with exquisite detail, reporting, but sort of neutrally in terms of evaluation, reporting neutrally on what they observe about the world. That is certainly not going on here. He's not neutral. You can feel constantly the frustration and contempt and aggravation with the world as it is. So he judges the world as tedious, but it's not, because there are no ideals possible, because it seems to be that it's not possible to achieve ideals. There's no moral judgment of what people do within the context of that universe. It's just, but what he seems to sympathize most with is the people who long for there to be the possibility of ideals. But he also, judgment comes in there too, because he judges them as being kind of foolish when they succumb to that feeling. So it's like the world is tedious. Some better natures wish that it were different. They're deluded, and art doesn't help them. but at least they want more than what is. I don't know. That's sort of how I.
I'm actually basically in agreement with that. The only thing.
Why do you sound so surprised when you say that you're?
As in, I guess what I'd say is one aspect of saying he thinks that it's important, the tedium, as in he thinks, that's the core of life. He thinks the empty idealism that is the core of life. And I actually almost want to say is, I don't think any good naturalist would be sort of totally reportorial. Like all of them in a sense have a certain attitude of like, no, like this is sort of like, people are like, yeah, they're well-meaning in general. At least a lot of them are okay, like Lewis, but it's a bit tedious, but not as crushing as like Flaubert. You can kind of make it sometimes, and then there's someone like, well, Tolstoy's is a god. I mean, sum up his attitude, but yeah, I'm actually on board with that.
But on it, you could have a continuum where somebody is. It's less the idea that life is tedious and people are silly and shallow, and that is just so dominant here. I mean, he really is taking so many of these characters to task for being so empty in their existence. So just on a continuum of naturalists, you could have somebody who's less judgmental, who's just more, well, that's how it is. But he just seems to be straining against the fact of what is, just does not like that this is how it is, and really so that there is so much that's tongue-in-cheek and has a mocking tone to it and sounds contemptuous.
Yeah, as Somerset Maugham describing Flaubert said that, in this connection, he says that Flaubert was a romantic, and the core of romanticism is a hatred of reality. And I guess you could say that about Flaubert. I guess he just takes it as for granted. He takes it, that's the way it is, but it's horrible.
I hate it. Yes, definitely. Who do we have next, Joseph?
John next.
Flaubert had a statue that he kept in his study. It was of Buddha all his life. And when Buddha comes out of his enlightenment from underneath the bo tree, the first of the four truths he teaches is life is suffering. It's very interesting. And just one more thing. I see Rodolphe as a foil to Charles. I'm reacting to that first paragraph on page 188, that beautiful paragraph you read. Rodolphe has as little imagination, as little original thought, is as stupid as Charles. His energies are directed towards women. There are people like this everywhere.
Yeah.
And it's fascinating, that connection.
Yeah, that's the
connecting
sensuality. The sensuality in your life.
Connecting it with all this negativity that you're seeing back to Buddha. He's getting at something very profound about the state of existence. I would argue.
Okay. Stefan?
So I found that letter very interesting for multiple reasons, and I remember something else about it that I really thought was interesting. I think Flaubert gives us insight through that letter, his thoughts on fate, because he says, fate is an easy out. It relinquishes Rudolph's responsibility. Like, well, that's just how reality had it set for us. It was just fate. And Flaubert seems to think, and know consciously, that's an easy out. So I wonder if he applies it to
I think I took that line a little bit differently, and I do want to highlight some of the details of this letter because it's just the most brilliant depiction of phoniness. I took that to mean, so he says, Emma, forget me. Why did I have to know you? Why were you so beautiful? Is it my fault? Oh my God. No, fate alone is to blame.
Yeah.
And then thanks to him, then put that aside. a word that is always effective, he said to himself. So it's
Exactly.
just about manipulation. Oh, this is how people speak romantically and grandly. But he's just using it in a completely calculating way to get rid of her.
And that's kind of what I meant.
Yeah. So it's I don't know if I see it much as a commentary on an outlook on fate as just empty romantic language that's used in a purely calculating way. Let's see, what else? Well, the candles flickered. Rodolphe arose to shut the window. When he sat down again, he said to himself, I think that's all. No, let's add this so she won't come back to me. He has to make sure that he's added something so that she won't think that there's even a possibility of them reuniting. So, oh, and there was one last farewell separated into two words, farewell, which he deemed to be in excellent taste. And then there was the glass of water that he uses to give it the appearance of a tear. And then, gosh, we could inventory the lines like this because I've encountered many of them over the course of this novel, where you have this elaborate scene where he's using all this romantic language to try to turn this into this grand separation, tragic end to their romance. And then at the end of the elaborate description, it says, after which he smoked 3 pipes and went to bed. That's reality for you. I'll throw myself into this world of romantic illusions for a moment, just in this calculated way. And then really life is smoking 3 pipes and going to bed. And then he sleeps late because he's not really giving this a second thought. All right. Ray, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I just first wanted to say, someone said that Rudolph is about as smart as Charles, and no, Rudolph is very smart. I mean, he's a professional. He really knows how to get around. And that letter, I mean, yeah, it's conniving and inauthentic, but it's done in a clever way, which is not Charles. And another thing is, I completely agree with your view about the fate of it's the same. He's using that word the same way that Franken uses something like the 3 eternal truths when you first meet in the fountainhead. It's just bloviate. It's just an effective, or way James Taggart there are certain ways he talks to Dagny, and at a certain point he treats it as like it's a spell that doesn't work. Yes, Stefan, I am a Rudolph apologist, okay?
Yeah. But then, okay, so we have to talk about the apricots. Oh my God. Scene with the apricots. So, oh my God. Okay, but so first of all, he smokes 3 pipes, goes to bed and sleeps in. She, when she receives the letter, looks at the pavement and considers ending it all. So that's what it means to each of them. She is on the brink of death and he's sleeping in.
Yeah.
But the scene with the apricots, just what is captured with that scene with the apricots. So the apricots were a basket which contained the letter from Rodolphe ending their relationship, which almost drove Emma to a mad attempt at suicide. And Charles is popping those apricots
and says, here, smell them.
And spitting out the pits and telling her to smell them. Talk about contrasts of worlds. It's just, I don't even know what to say about it. It just captures it. It's sort of akin to him buying her the horse, but on the other
side of it. Yeah.
He's just so oblivious to the significance of this or to what's happening with Emma. And it captures his emptiness so well. And yeah, or to that scene where she's thinking about the romantic implications of his failure and he's just thinking about tendons.
Right.
So she's thinking about ending it all after the dissolution of this relationship, and he's thinking these apricots are tasty.
Here, smell it, smell it, smell it, smell it. That was, oh my gosh, that moment where he was like, smell them. I was like, are you serious?
And then Homais saying it's possible that the apricots caused the fainting spell. Some natures are so sensitive to certain smells. Oh, so the tedious, clueless, empty characters, the wild, passionate natures, and each deluded in their own way, because really Rodolphe is just sleeping in.
Yeah. He feels not a bit guilty. He sleeps very well.
Yes.
Like, it's fine.
Yes. All right. We have to get to the opera,
Okay.
I guess. Well, one quick thing I wanted to say about Homais is that I love the scene where it's one of his long, carrying on about something, and then it says, extremely curious, isn't it? Yes, said Charles, who wasn't listening. The character who bores even Charles, he's a tedious bore.
I love that too. Yes.
So Grace, share also what you said about the opera, because I loved it. So
sure.
I love when Grace texts me in anticipation of a scene before she's even read it, but just with her sense of, so Ray, I think you missed her talking about this, but when she got to the clubfoot scene, she texted me and said that she just couldn't bear to see, she wanted to procrastinate watching him completely botch this surgery. So it was just like, she knew from the outset, like, oh God, here I go. So share what you said about the opera.
So they decide to go to the opera, and the whole time they're deciding to go to the opera, I'm like, don't go to the opera. Don't go there. Just don't. Please don't. And then naturally they do. So then at the beginning of that chapter, I texted Lisa again and I said, okay, one chapter to go. And I feel like I'm standing outside of this opera, wishing that I didn't have to go inside and watch Emma's lust for wealth be rekindled. And it ended up being not what I expected, but also exactly what I expected.
Mm-hmm. Maybe substitute a different word for wealth.
Yeah.
Although, I was thinking that that scene, that line about her confusing wealth with matters of the heart, there are a whole lot of words we could substitute in for wealth. And I think they're all on a plane with each other. So there are all kinds of things that, that her sexual relationship with Rodolphe, she's substituting that for matters of the heart, the passion of that relationship for matters of the heart. It's just the matters of the heart are the elusive thing that we can't really achieve, but we trick ourselves into thinking that having the title of Marquis puts you in that category, or we trick ourselves into thinking having a passionate sexual relationship puts you into that category, or we think, so there's all these things that are confused with matters of the heart.
Right. Even her brief bout with being a charitable woman while she was recovering from her sickness, I think that fits into that category.
Yeah. So any thoughts about the opera? There's one line I really wanted to highlight from this section where it's talking about the content of the opera, and then it says, Emma too would have wanted to escape from life and fly off in an embrace. So again, that's really an escape from life, is to fly off from an embrace. It's not a realization of life or an achievement of life. It's an
Mhm.
escape from what is real life.
Yeah.
Let's see. Oh, well, we have another one of those great contrasts that Ray was talking about, her reaction to what's happening on the stage and Charles's, who he cannot follow the plot. Everything he says about it is completely empty of emotional significance. And she's like shushing him, trying to get him to stop.
Shut up.
Shoshana.
Hey, I was just going to comment that there are a couple of things that are funny about it. If you know the opera and you know the novel, one of them is it says that she could follow it because she knew the novel, that in fact, the novel and the opera are kind of different. And that's almost notorious. And that, you know, someone who goes to see the opera says, whatever happened to Sir Walter Scott? I mean, there are characters with the same name, but the ending's quite different and so on. So in fact, that in itself is a little bit funny. And it is described the Sestet, which is a really famous piece in the opera where there are 6 different people and they're all talking at once. And you really kind of can't follow it unless you know the lyrics, because well, you know how opera is. Even if you know the language, even if it's in English, the way they're singing, it's very, very hard to follow the words. And so part of what's happening here is that she's seeing it and, you know, getting her own interpretation and pleasure from it. But the other thing, which is, I mean, there's a really obvious point, but what happens is that Lucia, who gets married essentially by being tricked and against her will, she stabs her husband on their wedding day. So you can kind of see why this would be interesting to Emma. You know, like, where's my dagger? And I should have done that. And it's based on a true story, you know, or at least a true legend. And you've probably heard of the Lucia Mad Scene. Well, you Google it. It's a sort of it's a famous scene in opera, and all the Lucias have to do that. You know, they you know, how did she handle the mad scene? And of course, she comes downstairs and her white dress is all bloody because of what she's been up to, but somehow she's confused and thinks that she's actually getting married to her true love, who is not the person she's left upstairs. So
yes, we can see why she'd be absorbed.
Yeah, I mean, I could keep going, but it's very, and also it's really funny that Charles can't follow it, because a lot of people can't follow what in the world is going on around here. And she's
almost projecting her own visions and interpretation.
Right.
Right.
She doesn't exactly care what she's watching.
Yes.
But she certainly couldn't explain it to him.
Yes.
Because, well, I mean, there are different characters and different villains and so on. And I'm just saying, you know, in some ways, it's not like watching an opera of a play that you really know, or a novel that you really know. This is sort of a meditation. With some different characters, but.
So for her, it's more the grandeur and the spectacle and the passion of it abstracted. What actually happens and plays out doesn't matter.
Yes.
Much. And I was just mentioning those lines that abruptly end a mood in the novel, and here's another one of those. So she falls in love with the actor, and it says she wanted to run into his arms, to take refuge in his strength, as in the incarnation of love itself, and to say to him, to cry out, "Take me away, take me with you, let us go, I am yours, yours. All my passion and all my dreams are yours." The curtain fell. The smell of gas mingled with that of human breathing. The stir of the fans made the atmosphere seem even more stifling. I mean, there could be no more abrupt ending to fantasy than that. Take me away with you, I'm yours. Curtain fall, smells.
The smell of gas. Stifling.
Oh, so brilliant. John.
Did you say me?
Yes.
Oh, sorry. Contrasting with that, Lagarde, the character, one of the things I find so fascinating in this novel is trying to discern what's real.
Mm.
So like place names are extremely interesting. And then we get Yonville, which is not real. And it's like Hardy's Wessex novels, where he opens up the real geography and creates this whole world inside it. Flaubert's doing the same thing. Well, anyways, it occurs on other levels than just geography. And we see it here in the opera. She goes through this fantasy with Lagarde. What is his name? Lagarde?
The actor.
He's fictional. He's not one of the real things in the reality that is Walter Scott's story or the actual opera. So Flaubert in that way is showing her being out of touch twice over. That's what I mean. Am I making any sense?
I think so. Although, are you saying
this is the art of juxtaposing these so that it calls attention to Emma's not being in reality?
Yeah. Well, so you could imagine someone going to the opera and falling in love with the character on stage who's being depicted, and she's falling in love with a story about the actor who's depicting. Or did she know the story, or do we only know the story?
I was going to ask that same question because I'm not sure.
She knows as much as she knows from Scott.
Okay.
Walter Scott.
No, but I mean about
the
actor who's playing the character.
And how he's like a womanizer.
Because it says
nobody knows that unless you research it.
No, but I mean, it's described in the book that part of his allure was the backstory of somebody finding him.
That's brilliant. Flaubert inventing a fiction.
Yeah. Shoshana, did you have something?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. You still from before. All right. So Leon appears at the opera, and it seems to me that Charles thrusts Emma into his arms, just like he did with Rodolphe, because isn't it he who encourages that she stay? So he just is utterly clueless once again.
Yeah, exactly. Like he did the same thing with Rodolphe. He's like, here, have a horse. Yeah. And with him, it's like, here, stay in this city with this man. I'm going home.
Ray?
Yeah, just one thing about the way that Charles gives every opportunity is that it makes me feel that it's not even enough for sort of the bourgeois conventional life to give you every opportunity to be with some other man, to have some other sort of life. It's like, no, that's not enough, because those things you're after are not enough. In a sense, Emma might have been happier if she had just been locked away with her dreams. At least she would have still been illusioned instead of disillusioned. It's like that Oscar Wilde quote of the only thing worse than not getting what you want is getting it. So I just, in a sense, it's like, even though she has these great opportunities that are literally handed to her, it's not enough.
Yeah.
It's not enough.
Well, and the other thing that it always makes me feel is that Charles, his cluelessness about thrusting her in the arms of another man seems to be proportional to his lack of like sensuality and desire and romanticism himself. So it just flatly does not even occur to him what might be happening between these two characters.
As in, he's not jealous because he doesn't understand what's being valued.
Yeah, exactly.
He's not, as in, you have to be like that in order to get inside of the mindset. It's like when Plato in the Republic talks about how, well, who do we want to have be the judges? And like, well, we don't want good people exactly to be the judges because good people don't understand what bad people are like.
Yeah.
They don't have that internal model.
Yeah. And it goes back to, you know, the first scene, their wedding night, where he was completely satisfied and she was left with total longing. And then there was that scene early on where she's dreaming of romance and he's like eating cheese, like, or something. So he just doesn't seem to have the capacity for it, so it doesn't occur to him. And meanwhile, Leon is leaning down and whispering in her ear and having his mustache brush her cheek, and he's oblivious to the effect that would have on his wife. Stefan, or is it Wendy? I don't know.
I'll just go first.
Okay.
So I love how Flaubert introduces Leon into the scene, because the tensions on Charles getting the water back to her and going through this like chaotic route to get back to her through all these people, and he doesn't mention that he runs into Leon, and then he tells her like, oh, by the way, this by the way is huge, you know what I mean? Like, it just smacks you. It reminds me of in Tess, when you find out she had a baby, and he just kind of sprung it on you.
Oh,
I
by
just
the
thought
way.
that was so brilliant.
Yeah.
So brilliant.
Because we appreciate this thing. I mean, that was another of Grace's text to me. Leon is baback, but Charles just mentions it as an aside.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Remember Leon? He's
Yeah.
I just want to say real quick too, I'm really curious, and this is the same feeling I had with Hardy and Tess, how Angel's going to work back into the story, then how what was the bad guy? What was his name?
Rodolphe.
No,
Alex.
Oh, Alex.
Alex.
Yeah.
How he was going to work back in, you know, how all that was going to come together. Now I want to see how he deals with Leon and Emma now that this is back together. So that's all. I just want to make that comment.
Wendy.
One thing that struck me in this chapter is an appreciation for the sincerity of Charles. That he's there. He went to this play, or the opera, because it was something sincerely that he thought would help her, but at the same time, help her recovery and her spirits. And at the same time, he's really trying to understand it. And he's saying, no, what's going on? And this is, and then when she decides, okay, we should just leave. And he's like, oh no, I think something dramatic is going to happen here. And I really want to, this tenor is supposed to be so good. I want to hear him sing. And then also the comment, when he's saying you should stay, the end of it, it says, let's see, you'll make a mistake by leaving if you feel this will do you the least good. And that's his blindness, where it's like, oh, come on, Charles, figure it out. But at the same time, it's that he's so focused on, look, hey, maybe this would actually help you. And I can see there's something wrong. And he so sincerely wants her to be happy, wants things to be okay.
I
I
appreciate you making that point, because we can get so caught up in kind of laughing at him and being frustrated with him, but he is earnestly kind. So he's so that's sort of getting caught up in Flaubert's outlook on the world too, because earnestness, that kind of complacent or contented earnestness, goes hand in hand with being clueless and stunted and having no depth of character. So there should not be any such dichotomy, but there is here. And because but I think Flaubert too is deliberately emphasizing his kindness and his earnestness. It's just even that line that you mentioned, I had to go back because I remembered that it made me laugh. So let's say something's going to be tragic. Why? Her hair's come undone. It looks like something's going to be tragic. He has no idea what's happening in the plot of the play. It's just, oh, her hair came down. This is going to be something bad's going to happen.
Getting crazy.
Right.
No, I'm glad you brought that up too, because I think that that's what, like, his sincerity and his like genuine desire for her to be okay and to love her is it's really sad.
I know. I'm just trying to think of other I would like to have other characters to connect to that, where they're kind. They're good.
Nice.
Gosh, they're so tedious and annoying at the same time. I mean, their tediousness just kind of grates on you at the same time. It would help for me to have other characters to connect that to, because that's
a thing.
That's a thing. Yeah. Ray.
Yeah. Let's see, there's a lot of things there. One in terms of another character is Flaubert wrote a story called A Simple Heart, which is basically like basically about Charles, except with the humor toned down and much more endearing. It's wonderful. And in terms of another character who's like grating, but like you care about them, it's like Babbitt from Babbitt. He's a tedious kind. You'd be bored to talk with him, but he means well. He really does. I think that's a lot of Lewis characters are like that. And in terms of like, I don't know, Flaubert's attitude towards his characters, a lot of them, they all in a sense feel like children compared to the narrator, as in maybe they're children who are just a bit daft and don't really think about a lot of things, but are trying well. There's another one the other ones have big dreams about things, and you smile at those dreams and you realize they're very fine, delicate dreams, but well, that's all they'll stay. And maybe they're ones that are kind of mean and unpleasant, but they all are like kind of blinded to the whole of life. There's no one that the narrator would fully identify with.
I wonder what it would mean to have a character that the narrator would fully what their place in this world would be. I guess they'd just be sitting back, sort of commenting on the futility of it all.
Well, it's sort of like the Somerset Maugham character in the Somerset Maugham novels. There's a lot of his novels that he's very Flaubert-like in a way of he's very disillusioned with life. He's very wise. He's even very sympathetic with people who are good. But he's passive. He doesn't pursue things. He has a comfortable existence. He likes reading books. He smiles at people who are well-meaning, and then that's about it. You
just have to accept the futility. So you couldn't take a lot of action in this world because there wouldn't be anything to gain from it.
What's the point?
Buddha-like, to borrow from John.
Okay. I will give you your next assignment. Reminder that we will not have a session next Sunday because I'll be on a plane from London. So we'll pick it up again the following week. And I believe we only have 2 sessions left. If you have my version of this book, it may come as a surprise to you that beyond page 324, it is the trial of Madame Bovary. So there's a big section at the end of this book that is about a trial related to this novel. So it ends much sooner. If you don't notice that, the book ends much sooner than you're expecting. So for next time, let's do chapters 1 through 6 of part 3. In my version, that is pages 215 to 273.
Okie dokie.
Quick question.
There's
supposed to be a scandal around this book. Have we already encountered it?
Oh, you can't ask a question like that.
I mean, there's been, I don't know for the time what is considered scandalous.
I mean, obviously there's a lot of scandal if there's this many pages on a trial related to it. But after the fact, I'll tell you the one thing I remember about this book from high school. There's only one thing that I remember, but we haven't encountered it yet. So
Okay.
Okay, I will.
I'll tell you when we
wait.
get there.
Okay.
All right. I will regret not being able to talk to everybody next Sunday. But we'll see each other in 2 weeks.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.